Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Black Screen Hoodoo. My name is Stacy, and I will be your host for this evening. So, today's story is going to pretty much go into detail where I need everyone who listens to this, like if you listen to the other stories on my channel, just because someone practices a traditional religion or a traditional spirituality, whatever, does not mean they are a good person. In addition to that, I need you to understand that you can be attacked, you can be hurt, you can even be killed because someone who has the spiritual knowledge that they have decided to come after you because of something that a loved one did. Okay? And some people, like I'm a Taurus, so yes, I hold grudges, but there are some people that hold grudges throughout multiple lifetimes. Okay? So this happened, it had to be back in the 90s because I was about 17 or 18 years old. I know I hadn't gone off to college just yet. And my aunt, if have listened to any of my other stories, my aunt that helped my mother smoke the spirit out of the home, this is the exact same aunt. And she showed up at my parents' house that night after the shift to talk about what happened. So I was not there, but I am going to tell the story pretty much how she told it. So at this time, she was working at a casino located in Robinsonville, Tunica County in Mississippi. Um, but we just call it Tunica, Mississippi, right? Because it's right beside the city of Tunica that's located in Tunica County. So, anyway, she was working at a casino called Sam's Club and she was a security guard. And this was back when I don't think they do it now, but back when I was, a teenager, the security guards there were licensed to carry. Probably because of all the money, on the premises, because it's a casino, free liquor, you know. Usually when those two things are in the mix, things can go bad. So anyway, this particular night, she was working. She used to always work overnights because my mother also worked there as a dealer part time. And I do remember that on the nights that my mother would go to work, my aunt would swing by and pick her up, or my mom would swing by and pick her up. They would just ride in together. And neither one of them made it home until about like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. So they would go in and work. I think it was called a swing shift. Anyway, all I know is that it would be dark. So she said this one particular night, she was in the little, security cart, golf cart, whatever you want to call it. And she was just riding around in the garage. And, you always ride around in the garage because, people, she said she would find a lot of people because when you gamble, you would get free liquor, just free liquor. Did not have to pay for it. It would be free beer, whatever type of, drink it was that you wanted. So it would be a lot of people passed out in the garage, and she did not like that. So she was, driving around doing whatever it was she was doing, and she got a call on the radio, and it was like, hey, we have a, young lady here. She needs an escort to her car. Again, my aunt didn't think anything about it, because a lot of times when people, would win money at the casino, back then, like you could do a wire transfer, but it would take a minute, right? It wouldn't be, like 24 hours. Sometimes it would take up to like 3, 4 days, maybe even a week. So a lot of people would be like, okay, I'm gonna put this much on a wire transfer to my bank and I'm going to walk out with X amount of cash. So my aunt was like, okay, this must be one of those instances, right? like she won, quite a little bit of money and she wants to take it home. So, they called on my aunt because she was closest. Okay. And so my aunt said, she just drove around from the garage up to, the door where the young lady was standing at. And when she pulled up, she said the young lady looked, I think she said her look was like not terrified, but very concerned. She looked very, very concerned. So, the young lady walked up to her, introduced herself, and said, "Thank you so much for escorting me to my car. But I do want to know if we can get just one more escort, please. Just one more escort. I will even tip you." And my aunt was like, "No, girl, you ain't got to tip us. Yeah, I'll call one more escort. No big deal, because again, this was the 90s, okay? I mean, everybody had a job. So, they had more than enough security. And there was this one guy that worked there that my aunt used to like really roll heavy with, right? Like he was just real cool. So she called him and he was like, "Yeah, yeah, no problem. I'll come up there." So a few minutes later, he come walking out the door and all three of them are riding out to this woman's, vehicle. And she didn't park like up close towards the front of the casino, but it wasn't way, way, way in the back. It was more like on the side. Like she was parked in front of the garage, but not in the garage. But it wasn't in front of the front doors of the casino. If any of you, like go to Sam's Club Casino, and if you don't, I guess you only got a limited time because from my understanding, they're shutting down in a couple of months. But if you know what I'm talking about, you know exactly where the young lady was parked. So, she was parked there and she was backed in. And my aunt said she noticed her being backed in because, when you come to a place like any business, really, most of the time people don't back in, right? They may pull through, but they don't really back in. They just pull in. Well, not only was the young lady backed in, she was backed in at a slant because, when you were pulling in, the parking spaces were at a slant, which means she drove forward and backed in at a slant. So she really, really wanted to back in for whatever reason. So anyway, they pull up. It's nighttime. They tell the lady like, "Okay, once you get in your car, we will go ahead and leave." The young lady is like, "Okay, so can you wait a moment? Because I saw someone in the casino and that person is after me. And I need to make sure that they are not in my car." So now that she has said that, my aunt and my aunt's, coworker, they both decide to, of course, put their hands on their guns and they're getting ready to call, getting ready to call in like, "Hey, it's a possible, um, stalker, whatever." And the young lady is like, "No, just give me one moment." So she opens up her car door and her tent is really, really dark on her car, right? But she opens up her car door and it's nothing in her car. And my aunt said the woman, was like, "No, no, something ain't right." She's like, I feel something. Something is not right." And, my aunt and her coworker, she said, they're like, "Well, there's no one in your car." And she was like, "No, I fit to check the trunk." So my aunt was like, okay, at this point, she's thinking this woman has had too much to drink, right? Like, what you mean you fit to check your trunk? Like, who gonna climb in your trunk, right? She said that the woman walked around, asked my aunt and her coworker to come around with her, and she was like, "I just need both of you here when I open my trunk." They're like, "Okay, yes, ma'am, fine, go ahead." She opens her trunk, and immediately my aunt and her coworker draw their guns. Not only do they draw their guns, they look at each other because they're like, "This is weird, like what we're looking at." What was in the trunk, as it was described to me, and I believe it, it had the body of a snake, the head of a cat and the eyes of a human. And she said that it sat there and it looked at them. You know, she said it looked at them from left to right, didn't run, nothing like that. But then it zoomed in on the gun of my aunt's coworker because like they had already pulled their guns out, but apparently he clicked his because he was about to shoot it. It saw the gun, and my aunt said she could tell that it realized what a gun was. So what did this part snake, part cat, part human thing do? It jumps out of the trunk of the car. Jumps out of the trunk of the car. And my aunt said that right now, like when she thinks about it, because I talked to her about this a couple of weeks ago, I was like, are you okay with me telling this on my channel? She was like, sure. She said now she's like, what I did was dangerous because I could have shot my coworker. I could have shot, the young lady. She said the same thing with my coworker. She said, I'm pretty sure if you were to ask him about it, he'd say the same thing. She was like, but when it jumped, she was like, we immediately fired. She was like, it was just instinct. We couldn't help it. She said they missed, right? Because it's really hard to shoot a moving target, right? So it jumps out of the trunk and it's like slithering across the road trying to get to the garage. But there are like these little steps that you have to take to get up to the garage. And my aunt said that's when her coworker shot at it again and hit it. And she said when his head like hit the ground and the way that it died, she said it died like a human. She said it bled the way that a human would bleed if a human was shot. And she said during all of this, the young lady did not seem scared. She said, in fact, the young lady was like, I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. I need to get to my husband. I got to drive back home. I got to get to my husband. And so they're asking her, and at this point they've called in, like, hey, we just shot something, right? So, the head of security is coming in, things of that nature. And, the young lady is like, I got to get home. So she reaches into her car, grabs a bag, walks up to this thing, puts it in the bag, ties it up, puts it in another bag, puts it in her trunk, and looks at my aunt and is like, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. I have got to go. And she gets in the car and she leaves, right? So like they try to get her to stay, okay? Like they tried their best to get her to stay. The woman wouldn't stay. The woman was like, look, I got to go. I got to get back home to my husband. Bye. I'm gone. So, that is what was told to us when, my aunt came by and she was a little frazzled, this and that. Now, of course, they looked on the security cameras and she's like, on the security cameras, you see it happening. But understand, security cameras back in the 90s were not as good as they are now. It was really grainy and it really just looked like they shot at a snake, right? Not a snake that had a cat head and human eyes, right? And, so she said that they had to write it up and everything because, firearms were discharged. They, looked up the woman, she had been playing, so they had an ID, on her and stuff like that. They had to call the police. Like, it was a whole thing, right? They had to call the police. And, my aunt was like, I have no idea. She said, that was a human. She said, that was a human. I know that was a human. And it's like, of course you hear about like shapeshifters and things of that nature, right? And is it possible? Yes. But usually what most people will do is that they will bend their environment, not so much switch themselves or change themselves, right? They will just, like I said, play with the environment and make it seem like something that is not. Okay? But in this case, that is not what happened. This person literally took on that particular type of shape of an animal. So fast forward, I want to say it was about, honestly, it was about a couple of months. My aunt ends up coming over to our house again because the lady comes back. She comes back to the casino. She comes back with her husband. She, asked to speak to my aunt, asked to speak to the coworker that was with my aunt, and they just want to thank them for helping her that particular night. So her and my aunt get to talking, and my aunt said that she, asked her, "Are you familiar with, like, back then they called it, working the roots, things of that nature?" She was like, "Because when you saw it," she said, "you didn't run away." She was like, "And neither did your coworker." She said, "Neither one of you ran away." She said, "I could tell you were scared, but you didn't run." So they ended up having, a little bit of a conversation. My aunt told her, basically how she was raised. And that's when she found out the entire story of this lady. So back in the early 1900s, we're talking like 1902, 1903, there was an issue. Some woman somewhere got her man taken from her, or however you want to say it, by another woman somewhere. She got so upset that she ended up putting a curse or a hex on her now ex-boyfriend, ex-husband. I'm not sure what he was. I know when it happened, they were, from what the lady said, they were in their late teens when it happened. And back then people got married in their late teens. So I don't know if that was her husband or not. But either way, the man left her for another woman. So she put a curse or a hex on this particular woman. And a few years later, after the woman got pregnant, after she gave birth, she ended up passing away from this particular hex, right? However, she had already told her family members about this woman putting work on her. Her family members, in turn, turned around and put work back on this lady. So we're just going to say family A and family B. So because of that one particular situation, it ended up causing two families to continuously go after each other, one after the other after the other. They just continue to throw work on each other. Okay? All because somebody lost some dick sometime in the early 1900s. So it was almost like blood and Crips, right? Like, if you go and if you kill, my boy, I got to come after your family. Well, what happens after I come after your family? Of course, your family going to take offense, so they going to turn around and come after mine. What is mine going to do? Turn around and come back after yours. So that has been going on with these two families since the 1900s. She had told my aunt that both sides had suffered multiple deaths, and it was always the women, never the men. The men were never touched. It was always the women. And it would be sudden heart attack, car accident, things of that nature, because there are still people on both sides of the family still throwing this work at each other. And this can happen. I mean, I've heard of it happening before. Yeah, I've been told other stories. I think, honestly, I believe it's happening right now. with someone that I know personally. I haven't consulted divination on it. I probably should. Um, but he has a really reckless mouth. So he has a very reckless mouth. And the person that he's gone after twice, like, something has happened to their family, and then his family is then hit really, really hard. So I'm thinking that's happening again. But anyway, I digress. So, like I said, that was going back and forth, back and forth. And she said that to date, the only women left in her family was her sister, and she had a daughter at the time that was 3 years old. So my aunt was like, okay, well, you left with that thing, in your car, right? What happened? What did you do? Who was it? Was it a person? And she was like, yes, it was someone. She said by the time she made it home, and she lived out in Bartlett, which is like a part of Memphis, Tennessee. She said by the time that she made it home and she got the bag, she went and got her husband. They went out, into some woods not too far from their home, set up everything they did. They opened the bag, and the person had transformed from that snake cat thing to a lizard. And the moment that they opened the bag, it tried to get away. She said her husband grabbed it, stomped on it, killed it right then and there. She said after they killed the lizard, they just went ahead and burned it. They were already out there in the woods. They burned it, and then they took the ashes and they poured the ashes over into the Mississippi River, and then they went home. And she said that she knows that that's not the end of it. Now, she said her and her sister have not thrown any workings at anyone, right? She said their mother did, their aunts did, but they did not. She said, when she became old enough and she was told about it, she realized what was going on. She was like, I'm not doing this no more. I'm just going to do my regular little root working that I do, but I'm not going after nobody. This other family did not care. They did not care. They were after her. She said if she had gotten in that car without checking and had been driving, she said she was pretty sure that snake would have found a way into her car from the trunk and probably would have choked her while she was driving or something to that effect. And my aunt was like, well, what made you leave the casino in the first place? She said, because when they were talking about you, when we had to do our incident reports and all of that, you had a hotel room. She said, why didn't you go to your hotel room? She said the reason why she didn't go is because she saw those eyes in someone else. She said the eyes that were on the snake cat thing, those eyes were on someone else in the casino. And she said 3 times, no matter how much she got up and walked away, no matter where she went, those eyes were following her. Like she would get up and go to another slot machine, and the person 3 slot machines down would have those eyes. Then she would get up, she would go somewhere else, and someone else who's completely different would have those eyes. So she said she knew that they were there. She knew that they had found her. She knew that they had followed her there, because it was supposed to be like, her husband was like, baby, you stressed out from work, yada, yada, yada. I got you a hotel room. I got you some money so you can go gamble, go spend the weekend at the casino. Yeah, that didn't happen. They were going to go ahead and take her on out. Now, I don't know if she's okay. I don't know if she's still alive. I mean, I'm assuming she was around the age of my aunt at the time, and my aunt is still alive. I mean, she's in her 70s, but she's good and alive, very healthy, still lives on her own, still gets about, does what she needs to do. So I'm hoping that the young lady, now older lady, is still alive, but she may not be. And her sister may be gone. And from my understanding, this feud was not going to end until the first family got all of their females taken out. She only had 3 left. I don't know how many was on the other side, but again, this is why if someone upsets you or someone does something against you, sometimes you may want to chill on throwing work at them, you know, because some people may know what they're doing and they may throw work back at you. And now you got a family feud that's been going on for, 100 years. Ain't nobody got time for that shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, not over some dick that died probably by the year 1915, 1920. I mean, I don't know. Just always consult divination first. Sometimes, and I'm all for getting your lick back if you know what you're doing. But, sometimes you may not want to hit them that hard, right? Just throw a jinx on them, make them stub their toe every night for a week when they get up and go to the bathroom, something like that, Just be very, very careful when you decide what type of work you are going to do against somebody. All right, so that is today's story. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, like, follow, subscribe, and all that other good stuff. And I will see you all next time. Bye.